All right, it's 9 o'clock. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for hopping on this morning for this month's Industry Hour. I'm pleased to introduce Tony Byler and Dan Fierstein of the Cohen, Seglias, Pallas, Greenhall, and Furman law firm. Today, they're going to be talking about practical construction law training for advancing project managers and supervisors. This session is being recorded and will be placed on the chapter's website later today. If you have any questions, you do have the ability to unmute yourself. I just asked, please be respectful if others are speaking. If you have more questions, you can also use the chat feature and we'll get to it that way. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Tony and Dan. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Hello, good morning, everyone. Listen, we're going to jump right in because we have an hour. We've got a lot to cover. But one thing I want to point out, Dan and I are partners in the construction department at Cohen Seglias. If you don't know, Cohen Seglias has 8 offices, including one in Philadelphia, New York, Wilmington, Washington, D.C. We go as far as Louisville right now, westward. So happy to have you on. We have about 80 to 90 attorneys, and half of us do construction only. So it's in that context where Dan and I are working with electrical contractors like yourselves. In fact, I think we represent many of the participants on this call right now. And it can be any project for a mom and pop operation to a major electrical power plant project to a telecom install worth tens of millions of dollars. And what we do with these clients of ours is we help them through the process of negotiating and getting around claims. And if they can't avoid those, helping them preserve claims and helping them resolve it on their own. And if they can't, we help them. But it's in that context where we sit down with our clients, and we've learned over the years, I've been doing this for about 3 decades and Dan about 2 decades. When we sit down, the rubber hits the road on projects like this through the project management team. It's not always the executives who are making the decisions, who need to make quick responses when things come up. It's a project management team. And as Dan and I were talking, we thought, you know what, we need to put on a program for project managers and superintendents and supervisors so they can be sensitive to those issues that will help them navigate successfully a project or will prevent them from doing so and will result in costly claims and other things. So that's the genesis of this presentation. We did one like this last year for the group. We're happy to be invited back. We've freshened it up a little bit, put some new language and forms in that will hopefully keep you entertained if you were here last year. We have some other anecdotes. But again, the idea is we want to talk about what it is that helps project management succeed. And if you're a project manager for your company, or if you're sitting in for your company, this is the messaging that you need to provide your project managers. And that is, these are the things to do to succeed. So we're going to jump right in. And if my PowerPoint works for me, we'll go right past those photos because you can see us on screen. There's sort of 5 key takeaways that Dan and I have observed in successful project management teams. It could be 10, it could be 20, but we tried to distill it to 5 key issues. And the overarching theme of successful project managers and superintendents is that they take ownership. They take ownership and they step up and they start to work not only within the scope of their responsibilities on a project, but in a way that an owner would, someone who's higher up. And it's that taking ownership and making yourself irreplaceable to the company that drives your rise within that company. And I think that's what we're all striving for. And it's what your company wants. It wants young project managers and young superintendents to move up from foreman into that role and beyond. So let's talk about the first key, and that is thinking like an owner. As I said already, it's sort of like taking ownership. And what do I mean by thinking like an owner? You start to think about the business aspects of these projects. I mean, doing your job, ensuring that there are laborers who show up and you're keeping daily records, that's all well and good. You have to do that. It's expected, but that necessarily won't push the project forward, and it won't push your career forward necessarily. So you have to think, what is it that an owner would be concerned with? And the owner's often concerned with the bottom line, profit at the end of the day. That's what motivates most companies. So anything that you can do to increase the revenue or to reduce the costs is going to result in an increased profit. And that's the simplest formula that anybody can use. You take your revenue, you subtract your costs, and you get profit. So what are the things that you can do or that you need to be looking at and that we see successful project managers doing? they start to look for ways of increasing revenue by change orders, looking for those, finding them, properly documenting them, dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's, so they become part of the contract. And then that drives additional revenue. It can also be done at good estimating. And I don't know if the project management teams in your respective companies are responsible for estimating, but if that's the case, estimating comes into play. What can you do to reduce costs? There's a number of things you can do, right? You can take steps to increase efficiency. You can manage the labor and the materials proactively, scheduling them, monitoring what it is that you're projecting, ensuring that you're not spending additional costs in throwing additional labor or overtime or other things that are non-compensable. Hedging, perhaps, in this environment of increased costs for commodities and supply chain issues, which we'll discuss. Hedging, getting more, ordering more cable and cable tray and equipment than you might need for a particular project, setting it aside so you have it available to you, and perhaps at a lower cost and at a competitive advantage when it's time to move forward on other projects. These are all things that an owner would think about. It's what you should be thinking about and talking about. So let's talk about the next key step. And it concerns the turnover, the handoff meeting. And what I mean by that is this is a traditional meeting, should be a meeting or a series of meetings, where the estimating department, who's come up with the price and the agreement on the contract, then turns over the project to the project management team. If that meeting doesn't take place, the project is in a bad way. And why do I say that? Or if it takes place and it's not followed carefully, it's in a bad way. Well, because the estimating team has made certain assumptions about what the company needs to do to be able to deliver the project on time for a cost that's not going to exceed the fixed price if it's a fixed price contract, or it's going to be on budget. The project management team needs the benefit of knowing what those assumptions are. If it doesn't, it's the easiest thing to trip up, right? And who's going to be blamed in that scenario? It's going to be the project management team who's going to be blamed if that information didn't flow correctly. So it's critical to have the meeting, critical to understand from estimating what were the assumptions. Do we need to order lead items? Is our ability to deliver this project on time and on budget cued into sequencing? What is that sequencing? What is the rate at which we have to deliver labor and materials? What do we need to be aware of? I need to know what you know. So this is a critical time. It's something that project managers and supervisors on the rise have to take seriously and become proactively engaged in. Look at the contract. Talk to the estimators about the contract. Find out what the tripping points could be. All right, let's look at a third set. And by the way, I'm going to fold Dan into this. Sorry, he's standing by patiently. But I'm going to talk about.
I'm just the eye candy. I'm not going to say anything today.
Thanks. So the third key issue is tracking performance on a project, at least on a monthly basis. I see the best will do this on a weekly basis. And what do I mean by tracking performance? There's a number of ways for a project management team to track what your anticipated costs are going to be, what your material allocation is going to be, what your manpower is going to be on the project. It's important for you and your team to plot that out at the very beginning, to know what it is that you need to bring to the project in what time sequence. And why do I say that? Well, one, it's a good way of ensuring that you're doing the first item, and that is thinking like an owner, ensuring that you're not overspending and that you're not having to bring in additional overtime to accelerate your crews to make up for things that you just missed or overlooked in the first place, right? So let's take a look at an example. And what I'm showing you right now is a cable install tracker that was used by one of my clients on a power plant project. And what it does is it shows an S-curve that was used by my electrical contracting client. And this was tracking one of the four main tasks that they were performing on this project. The tasks were cable tray installation, followed by conduit, followed by cable pulling, which this tracker is showing, and then terminations. So what the company did is it plotted in red, in a line in red, what its expected allocation of linear feet of cable install was going to be during the course of this project. The bottom, I forget whether it's the x-axis, I believe it's the horizontal axis, shows the number of weeks that they were projecting to perform this activity on the project. And the y-axis, the vertical axis, shows in hundreds of thousands the linear feet of cable that was being installed. So what do we know? What would my client have known as they were tracking this as of week 4? If you can see that on your screen, what they would be able to discern is that they had planned to install a certain quantity of cable at this point in time. And the blue line, which showed their forecast at the time, was departing. It was below that. And their actual cumulative, you can't even see, it's behind the blue line, was negligible or nothing. So at that point in time, my client knew, or should have known if it was looking at this tracker, that it was falling behind its projection. So what does a good project manager or superintendent do at that point in time? They start asking questions, right? This tracker will show that you're behind your projection, but it won't necessarily show you why. And you need to look into that, because it could be you're behind because you don't have a sufficient amount of cable on the project. It could be that you're behind because you don't have a sufficient number of labor on the project. A number of different issues. It could be that you're behind because predecessor activities to your performing your cable pulls have not yet been completed, and it's not your damn fault. And that's what was the case in the matter that we had. So you need to know this. And why do you need to know this? So that you can then start to take steps to notifying your customer and preserving your claims, which we'll address going forward.
And Tony, just to jump in briefly, because I want to give everybody some perspective. What you're looking at was put together by a very large electrical contractor on a large combined cycle power plant. So the message to take away here is not, I have to track all of my different quantities for all of the different activities on every single job, no matter how much the contract is for. This just happens to be a great example. Don't look at this and say, well, I have to do this for every single job. And frankly, your company might be smaller and not large enough to be able to put these cost controls into place. So the message here is doing something more than just putting a bid together and seeing where the cost ends up at the end is critical. And what you'll learn is that these documents that you guys are putting together, even your daily reports, if they are showing where folks were and how many laborers that you had, we're using that information if and when you're in a dispute to build the case and prove it. So that's the other piece about the message here is project managers are really gonna our eyes and ears on the project before Tony and I ever get involved. So you're making our jobs that much easier and the costs that much less should you need to go after something for a claim.
Right on, Dan. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is what I did as Dan was talking. You'll see this is just a simple piece of graph paper. It shows an S curve and it shows a couple of numbers. This will suffice. This will actually work. If you don't have that sophisticated piece of software, use a napkin, use a piece of paper, but track it out in advance and follow through. Doesn't matter how you do it, do it. That's what the best do, for all the reasons that Dan just mentioned. All right, let's go to the fourth key step in successful project management, and that's really understanding the culture of the company that you're in regarding profit and claims. And why do I say that? We gave a presentation years and years ago to a budding project manager who listened to everything we said, and then in the subsequent weeks went off and started sending claim notices on all of the projects, only to get smacked over the head by the owner of the company, who said, "You didn't clear this with me. This isn't what we do. We're a relationship contractor." And then he reeled it in and realized, oh, wait a second, I now have the skills, but I need to make sure that I'm doing that and executing it within the culture of the company. Cultures are very important. Hopefully you're at your company right now because of the culture. You may find that you have a fallout in the culture between your company and yourself. That's okay too. But to be successful within the company that you're in, you have to ensure that the culture is harmonious. We have a bunch of contractors who will get angry with us if we don't find ways for them to claim and make up dollars at the end of the project. Claims contractors. We have a bunch of clients who are relationship contractors who want to have nothing to do with claims. And if we talk to them about those things, they get edgy and angry. So know the culture of your company, know what you need to do, and that'll help you better navigate it and have a useful working conversation when claim issues come up. And we'll describe that a little bit later as well. Last, number 5, taking ownership. Back to the idea of taking ownership. It's time to start thinking like an owner. It's time for you to start developing relationships and connections and a network with other advisors outside of your company. And what do I mean by that? CPAs, supply contacts to supply houses, people who are selling software that could assist your company, lawyers, whomever it might be. It's important for you to start those contacts. And it's a great and easy thing to do, especially if you're involved in a trade association like NECA, where you have events like this and you get to meet people. Culture those relationships, have those there. I'm certain that the owners of your respective companies didn't start their business knowing everybody. They had to learn the people to help them. Learn, become an innovator within your own company, become a disruptor, have additional resources available to you. These are important things. Again, an idea of taking ownership. Right, so I've gone through the 5 issues. I'm going to transition over to Dan, and then we're going to start talking a little bit about the substantive areas of law and some of the key issues that you need to keep an eye on to help navigate.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, this is really just kind of closing the loop on this particular topic. And so the real key to survival and to making sure you're doing excellent project management, adaptability is huge. I think it was the great Mike Tyson who said everybody goes in with a plan until they get punched in the face, or somebody said something along those lines. And it's important to have that plan, but it's also important to adapt and to be flexible, because we all know that the project is never ultimately going to reflect the plan. We refer back to the plan, we use it to track for budgeting, but we need to be nimble. And we need to be keeping our eyes on what's actually taking place in order to manage it. So let's jump right into change orders. And as Tony alluded to, this, I mean, jobs can be really won and lost on change orders, right? You know, we know there are going to be scope changes and changed conditions. We don't know what they are, and we don't know how we're going to capture them. So just using the AIA, which is a pretty even-handed set of form contract documents. They define a change order as a written instrument signed by or prepared by the architect, signed by everybody, including the owner, the contractor, the architect. Not always going to be the architect. You know, when you're a subcontractor to a GC, it's probably just going to be you and the GC signing the agreement. And the changes could be to the scope of work that has an effect on the price. Could be an add, could be a deduct if there was some value engineering or something's no longer going to be installed. And let's not forget that a change order can also be for time. You'll hear us talking a lot about delay. And you know, if you study your contracts, they're inevitably going to say, if you think you've been delayed, you've got to tell us about it within a certain period of time. And you've got to do your best to tell us how much time you need and then ask for it, because chances are that same contract is going to say, by the way, if there is a delay, all you get is time. You don't get money, you just get time. And we're going to talk about ways around that, because what I think we all know on this in this webinar is that time extensions are almost never given, because the stadium's not going to open late and the school's not going to open late. And we use that reality against our customers if we are in need of an extension of time. We'll get into that. Just this is the AIA form that goes with the definition that you just looked at. It's an AIA. You'll see signature lines for the architect, the contractor, and the owner. Again, this form is in the context of you're the GC, you get a change order from the owner. It's prepared by the architect. That's the model, but it can look a number of different ways. But you will see in sort of halfway down, it says the contract time will be increased by 0 days. So if you don't ask for time, or if you ask for time and they reject it, then there's going to be a 0 in there, and you should know that and be paying attention to it.
Yep. Time always gets overlooked, and it's a shame, and it should never be, because as you probably all know, there are consequences to not performing your work on time, such as liquidated damages and actual delay damages. So always be asking for time when there is an impact.
So what is a construction change directive? This is, again, you're looking at an AIA definition. It walks and talks like a change order. The catch is that you and your customer have probably not quite agreed on, it's a change, there's a scope change, there's some impact there, but there's not quite an agreement on what that scope change is, or how it's going to be paid for or tracked, or how much time. So this is a written order. It's going to come from your customer, and it's going to say, hey, we have this change. We're adding, or we're converting the 4th floor to an apartment, and we're gonna figure out the cost and the time impact later. You can see in the form, again, it looks a lot like the change order that we looked at, and you can see in the proposed adjustments under number 1, there are already built into it a few different ways of paying for it. One would be lump sum, probably unlikely, because if you were able to agree on a lump sum, you probably would just roll it into a change order. You might do it on unit pricing. The likeliest scenario is they're going to say, hey, I know it's a change, track all your costs associated with it. I'll sign your T&M tickets, roll it up, it'll become a change order. So we're okay with construction change directives. You have the directive in writing there. That's an agreement and a concession that it's a change. But what you need to do at that point is you need to track your cost. You need to create the X number so that you're isolating that work, because ultimately, if it doesn't roll into a change order or it gets kicked to the end of the job, you're going to need and want to refer back to and be able to demonstrate persuasively what are the costs associated with that change. Because if I have those costs, then an arbitrator or a mediator is going to understand I'm entitled to that cost plus whatever the markup for profit and overhead that lives in my contract. That's how that's going to go.
Great. Just and on that idea, Dan, before we transition away from this, let's all remember, change orders, change directives are the first step in the process where you see that there's a deviation in what you expected, the plan that Dan talked about, and something is going awry, and you ask your customer for an adjustment. If you follow the rules, if you follow the requirements of your contract, if you follow the information in the change order forms or the construction change forms, what you've done is you've altered the content of your contract. Your company is now entitled to the value of the work that you do. If it's a construction change directive, you're going to have to figure out what that value is. But you've demonstrated now a legal right to be compensated for that work. If Bob on your customer's project team asks you to do something and you do it without memorializing it in writing with signatures, however your contract requires you, you don't have a change order. And at the end of the day, if you can't get resolved, people like Dan and myself have to engage experts to prove that the work that you performed is outside the scope of your work. And that can sometimes exceed the value of the claim itself. So keep that in mind. These are important steps.
Well,
Dan, are you ready to transition to the next?
I am.
Cool.
So what's the deal with supply chain? It's the elephant in the room. Everybody knows it's a problem. Everybody has probably different reasons for why they think it's happening. But at this point, for you guys, for us, it doesn't matter, because it's the reality and everybody needs to adapt and plan for it. Just some numbers for you, not that I have to tell you how serious this is, but supply chain disruptions were up 638% in the first half of 2021. And we've seen workforce surveys showing that 88% of the surveyed construction firms were experiencing delays, and 75% were blaming longer lead times, material shortages. We all know how much baby formula is being consumed on these project sites, so it's a big problem. But in all seriousness, it's affecting construction like any other industry. I have clients and cases where the switchgear or the transformers or major equipment, the suppliers are they're making promises that they think they can keep, and then the date moves, and then the client has to tell the GC, and the GC has to tell the owner, and everybody gets upset, and nobody really has control over the situation. So everybody just wants to push the cost and the time impact of that down on everybody, and it ultimately hits you guys and your suppliers. So that's the situation that you're faced with, and it's not pretty. And we're going to try to teach you how to navigate it as best as you can. The other thing I want to say is we're talking about once you already have the contract. So whatever lives in the contract about how to deal with supply chain issues, material price escalation, things like that, the die is cast. We could probably do a whole seminar on how to negotiate these terms and how to position yourself before the contract, and we're happy to do that in the future. But this is for project management, and that's what we're going to focus on. So, sorry, Tony, did you want to say something?
No. I was going to take over the next slide. That's okay.
Sure. So the only question is, how can everybody in the chain protect against these problems?
Right. Wow. And you nailed that slide. So I think it's right. I mean, there's always been disruption. And there's always been supply chain issues or potential supply chain issues in every project, right? I mean, that's just the nature of the complexity of the construction process. But we're seeing it at all-time highs now as a fallout from the COVID pandemic and the economy churning and chugging to get rolling again. So this is at an all-time high. It will always be there. I think everybody has to realize this is not going to go away. And this is in a way a nice little test to get you ready for the next one, hopefully smaller little bumps. But then the question is, what do you do? What do you do if you find yourself on a project that is, as Dan described, has a supplier saying, your switchgear is going to be showing up, and then week after week, month after month, it's not because it hasn't been released, or it's in a ship stuck in the Suez, or something along those lines. That can actually happen. So what we see effective project managers doing is addressing the issue in these 3 steps, in this order of priority and in this order of importance. And there's no guarantee that you will be able to successfully manage this. You may have signed a contract that said time is of the essence and you're going to deliver the equipment that you are contractually obliged to provide. And if you don't, you're going to be hit with liquidated damages and you could be terminated. That is the reality of the risk of the industry in which we're in. But these are good practice ways to try to navigate those hurdles and try to soften the blow and perhaps be successful. So let's just talk about them. One is communication, right? If you are a project manager and you see issues and you hear issues and you communicate that in writing, hopefully by email as well as verbally, to your customer to let them know, hey, I want to let you know we've got another week slip. We'll do whatever we can to change our work that we've planned. We're going to try to lessen the blow. I'm letting you know I don't control this. It's the equipment that the owner requested. Sometimes it's the equipment the owner's to supply. But you have to get in front of it. Work with your customer to try to let them know so they're not surprised and come up with solutions. Be their partner, help them out. They will likely reciprocate. Not always, but the likelihood goes up if you do that. The other thing is, the second step is be fair. If you're fair towards your customer, if you do some work and you don't necessarily charge them for a change order, you throw it in, you try to drive a relationship, hopefully that will pay dividends in them reciprocating and helping you along if you're tripped up by labor or material or equipment supply chain issues. Ask your customer to be fair with you. Tell them that you're doing the thing that is fair. Use the word fair. It's psychologically an important communication. It begs reciprocation. And you'll see some of the communications that you'll see in a little bit uses that word for that reason. Again, no guarantee, but it helps things along. If you can't get the relief and your customer isn't willing to work with you or can't work with you anymore because of these supply chain issues, then you need to start looking at your contract. You need to start looking at the remedies that you may have. And Dan and I will discuss some of those remedies later. But the one who rushes to the contract remedy initially is one who's not going to develop that rapport and the important relationship that is likely to help buffer these spikes. Dan?
This happens to be an unprecedented situation. And I think that there's power in knowing that in all likelihood, your customer is probably not going to be able to find a better, faster way to deliver the equipment that everybody wants. What I mean by that is no guarantees, obviously, but terminating you because you can't get the switchgear on time, very unlikely to lead to another subcontractor, another supplier coming in and delivering equipment on time because everybody's dealing with the same issue. That's not licensed to be a dick about it with the customer, but there can be real peace and power in knowing that before you start writing letters. You might even say, guys, we all know you can say this in a meeting. I wouldn't put it in writing. You can terminate me, but we all know where it's going, and it's a force majeure, as we'll get into.
Yep. And look, Dan and I represent a lot of electrical contractors. We've been involved with NECA for many years, but we also in our practices represent owners. And the last thing an owner wants is to have to spend even more money and lose even more time on a project. So don't, as Dan said, don't abuse that, but be aware of that and message that in a kind and helpful way that you understand their predicament and you're doing everything you can to lessen that blow. All right, so here's a suggestion that we offer to you. Your contract is going to dictate what your change order requirements are, but this is language that we've seen, that we've offered, that in certain circumstances that can help you navigate some of these issues. And this is language that we rolled out earlier in the pandemic, and it makes reference to certain things that may not be as visible or as impactful today as it was then. But it's a communication that you should send to your customer, not just a proposed change order, but a cover letter, and let them know, look, we're writing to you because there's change order provisions. We're being impacted because of whatever it may be, supply chain issues, fallout from the pandemic, and we're incurring, and we are likely to be incurring the following costs, and just identify these costs. And among them is escalation relating to shortage of materials, and it would be both escalation and additional time due to shortage of materials. And then say, accordingly, we're submitting a change order request in the amount of X dollars and Y days. This is part of the communication that you should be proactive about. See it coming, get in front of it. Again, you'll see that it's a fair, even-handed communication to your customer. And you should continue in that, or you can. Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to, well, this works too. I just want everyone to see, this is in quotes for a reason. This can be copied, pasted, adapted to your situation. And as a reminder, when Rob sends out the materials, the survey and all the rest of that, we will have given him a PDF of these slides. There's a lot of material that you can, again, copy, paste, and adapt. And this would be an example of that. Just don't use the actual slide because it says Cohen Seglias at the bottom, and then they're going to already know that you've hired a lawyer.
That's a good point.
Okay.
And I was remiss in saying that. We will circulate a PDF. It'll go to Rob. Rob will circulate this to you with an evaluation form afterwards. So yeah, you will have this benefit. Save it someplace and refer to it when these issues come up. Again, it's not a license to use every word that we have in here because your contract will be invariably a little different, but it's a good starting point and it will help you make those communications in a timely way. Just to attenuate that communication, additional information that you can put in your letter is, look, and again, this is going back to this fairness idea. If you have questions about this, if you have concerns about this, let me know. Perhaps we should sit down and talk about this. Let's get to the table and let's work this out. Let's work together to find the fairest and the best solution to this issue. Teaming, supporting your customer, that's what they want. That's the apple That's or the carrot that you want to provide your customer rather than the stick of threatened litigation. All
Okay,
right.
so we've talked about the kind of the dynamics of how to talk about this issue with your customer. Ultimately, you may end up in the situation where you do need to consider what your contract may entitle you to, or what it might say about the very situation. Now, Tony's advice, which was good, is let's not lead with asking or citing to the contract about all the reasons why they owe us relief. But I would say you want to know what these provisions say about the issue before you write the even-handed appeals for fairness, because you do want to be prepared for, okay, if and when they say, I hear you, but there's too much money here that we're all going to lose. I can't help you. You want to know what happens next before it happens. And this is a call out of a lot of the contract provisions that you want to look at. Liquidated damages, that's pretty obvious because we're talking about delays, and the consequence for a delay, if there's a liquidated damages provision, is that each day you miss substantial completion, there's a predetermined amount of money, $1,000 a day, $10,000 a day. It's really going to depend on the project, right? If it's the power plant we talked about, it's going to be a lot more than $1,000 a day, because there's a commercial. You can really quantify how much power generation and dollars from customers am I losing. It's going to be a pretty penny. To the right hand side, material escalation clause. That is basically a pre-negotiated right to increase your contract price when material prices escalate past a certain threshold. Again, subject or seminar for another day, but there are ways to draft that in a way where you're not just going to get dollar for dollar each time the price goes up 1%. There's going to be kind of a shared risk there. If that provision lives in your contract, then the letters that we just looked at, they're probably going to look a lot different.
And those clauses
Go ahead,
aren't likely, those escalation clauses aren't likely to appear on their own. They're generally favorable down the stream, and customers generally don't give the most favorable terms down the stream. So hopefully you can negotiate, or your estimating team can negotiate an escalation clause if it's something that they're looking for. And if that's the case, you should feel free to reach out to Dan or I or your other construction lawyer who's working with your company to ask for suggestions there.
So when you're talking about warranty and guarantees of performance, and I'll pair that also with suspension of services, you're entering into that territory where you're asking yourself, what happens if this goes all the way to its logical end? Am I stuck in this job no matter what? Is there a way out? Or is my customer going to be able to say, do whatever the hell you want, but you gave me a performance bond. So if this doesn't go right, I'm just going to call the performance bond. They're going to step in, and you and the bonding company are going to be paying for the cost to complete, even if that exceeds the value of your contract. So these are things to think about, to know about. And force majeure, that is just a fancy term that is it's really, you want to think acts of God, right? War, fires, strikes, pandemics that you didn't know about before you entered into the contract. These are what we would call down the road in a few different slides, excusable delays, where nobody's really at fault. Chances are your contract will identify a few situations where there's a delay, act of God, nobody's fault. That doesn't usually translate to dollars, but it does typically entitle you to an extension of time because it's nobody's fault. And this supply chain is the type of unforeseen situation that we might try to place into under this umbrella to justify an extension of time. And then, of course, the question is, when did we enter into this contract? Did everybody and their mother already know about this supply chain issue, or not? And that's where the rubber's going to meet the road. There's some others in there as well, but I think we should keep going. I can just sum this conclusion really, we're telling you one main thing. If you don't ask, you don't get. So you'll see a fun little quote from Wayne Gretzky about missing 100% of the shots that you never took. None of this happens if you bottle it up, keep it inside, and try to take it on the chin. And so it all starts with the ask. You might hear no. That's about the worst thing. Might be accompanied by some expletives, but the first thing you'll hear is no, and that's not necessarily the end of the road. It's going to take a few no's and maybe a couple of meetings to get it, everybody to wrap their arms around the situation.
Thanks, Dovetail, because the question is, if you get that no, then where are you? Right? You've tried your best. You've submitted your change order proposal. You've attempted to negotiate a resolution of the dispute, and the answer you're getting is no. What's the next step? Next logical step is claim process, and your contract's going to speak to claims. It's going to speak to claims in a bunch of different provisions, as we will see. Let's talk about claims. What is the claim? Well, the claim, it's going to be defined by your contract, but it's essentially when you've asked for relief under your contract in accordance with its terms, and you're not getting that relief. So it encompasses everything. You want more time, you need more value, et cetera. That's when you pursue a claim, usually after you've attempted to do it through the change process and negotiations. So, the reality is there's barely a construction project, no matter how big nor how small, that goes through the process without there being a risk of claims or the potential for claims along the way. That's the nature of the business. And the recovery to your company or the defense to your company is dependent upon how well you document your entitlement or how well you document your defense to those claims. It's the reality. The contract will put that onus on you. So what does that mean if you're the project manager? Dudes, it means you've got to keep excellent records. You've got to keep good contemporaneous records. If you're being impacted on the project, if you have these issues, you have to let your customer know immediately by emails, by notices, whatever your contract requires. And your contract will usually require a very prompt notification if you've been impacted. The consequence of not doing so oftentimes will result at least in an alleged waiver of those rights. And that's a very dangerous position for you to be in. You don't want your company to have to incur additional costs when there's no way of recovering it. And the only reason that you couldn't recover it is because you waited too long to provide your customer with notice. That's not where you want to be. Not good for your career.
Just to put a finer point on it, with the documents and the record keeping, it doesn't need to be pretty, pristine. Those daily reports, they can be handwritten, provided we can, they're legible. I have a case, there you go, the handwritten S-curve. I have a case right now where one of the central issues about figuring out who's entitled to what is going to be which company's daily reports are more reliable. The other side is it's the large GC. Theirs are typed, they look nice. I suppose that makes them more believable. I don't know. Ours are handwritten by the foreman, but we've gone through them. We've put them side by side and shown photos of the progress. Ours, I'm biased. Ours are inherently more reliable. They don't look like it. It looks like some chicken scratch versus a nice typed up thing, but there's substance to it. And the arbitrators are going to care about the substance more than they care about what it looks like. So it's quality. Okay.
Right on. I couldn't agree more. And you remember we talked about your firm's, your company's, how they view claims, how they look at what is most important, relationships or bottom line, the culture. Well, this plays into it as well. And I've often had clients, major clients, who just don't want to be involved in the claim process and will fight against it. What you should know is that the claim process is actually a way of defending as well. For example, if you're working for an owner, which I'm sure many of you do, and you have subcontractors who are working under you, which I'm sure many of you do, and the owner is delaying the project, it may be your company's inclination not to claim up against the owner, not to send those written requests for extensions of time, not to say, hey, we're being impacted. What's the consequence? The consequence is that your subcontractors are going to be impacted just equally as you, and your subcontractors are likely to bring a claim. And if you haven't memorialized the impact that you've received up the chain and preserved your rights, then you may have no ability to pass your subcontractor's claim up. You might get stuck with it. You may get blamed for it. So always be on top of this, whether your culture is to pursue claims or not. Notify, keep your customer informed, let them know when somebody else is stepping on your toes and not allowing you to progress in the way and in the manner in which you planned. There's a couple more things here, but let's be mindful of this. Your contract in any given project is going to say and will say what you need to do in connection with a claim. It'll let you know how soon do you have to provide notice. It'll let you know what do you have to provide in support of those claims, who you have to provide it to, how you provide it to them. It's the rare contract these days that will not provide you with that granular level of information. And the contract will not only do that for general claims, it will also do that in the context of special claims, claims for schedule impacts, delays, et cetera. So I'm showing you right now on the screen, just a standard AIA form contract. It would give you 21 days after the occurrence to identify and write in writing your claim to your customer. Most contracts that are out there today impose 24-hour notice, 48-hour notice, 72-hour notice. All right. So don't assume that you have a lot of time to provide these notices. One of the first things you should do on any project is take a look at the notice requirements in the contract that you've been given, familiarize yourself with that, and be aware how quickly you have to act and provide notice.
Okay, so continuing along, delay, just another type of claim that we've kind of hit on here. This is, again, using the AIA as an example. Here you will see that this reads a little bit more like a force majeure clause because the delays they're describing are labor disputes, fire. Here's one that might sound familiar: unusual delay in deliveries. I mean, the AIA has already thought about this supply chain issue and unavoidable casualties. These are the acts of God that will likely entitle you to time because it's really nobody's fault.
If you provide timely notes.
Right. So you're asking yourself, as Tony said, what does the contract require? That's going to be your roadmap. It's going to tell you what they need to know, when they need to know it. And you're asking yourself along the way, each time you sign a partial release with that payment application, are we on time? If not, why? Should I be asking for time? You want to tell your customer and quantify the impact as best as you can at the time. Nobody's expecting you to know dollar and cent. How is this going to impact you? You might not be able to know it until a few more dominoes fall in the project. All you can do is work with what you know at the time, and you're creating a paper trail that Tony and I are going to be able to use very persuasively if there is a dispute. Few different types of delay. We talked about non-excusable is when it's your fault. Again, I'm biased. I don't see it often with the electricals because you guys are usually first on and last to leave. That said, sometimes it's going to be your fault and you need to own that, and you're not going to get money or time for that. Excusable, non-compensable, number 2, nobody's at fault. You're entitled to time. That's the force majeure, act of God, unprecedented supply chain stuff that we've been talking about. The dollars come in at number 3, excusable and compensable. It's somebody else's fault for whatever reason. Predecessor trade, the carpenters are just totally hijacking the situation, and it's impacting the MEP trades. And in the next couple of slides, you'll see some of the causes of delay. The first several are owner-driven, access issues, subsurface, design changes, late approval of shop drawings. That's all owner and design professional driven. And as we go on to the next slide, we'll see other things like I'm being held up by another contractor, lack of project coordination and scheduling. That's going to be a contractor GC driven issue. And then 9 through 12, again, were examples of excusable but not compensable delays. The costs that are associated, you're going to need your supervision and your field overhead for a longer period of time than you had anticipated. So that's going to be on the table. Equipment costs and rentals, wage escalation, because now you're performing in the next wage period that starts May of the next year. You had no intention of performing during that. There's inefficiencies associated with it, finance costs, reduced opportunities, profits, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. So there's other questions you should be asking yourself about delays. And by the way, that list of costs, that's there purposely. Refer back to this slide in the future when you're writing a notice to your customer and let them know these are the impacts that you're incurring as being forced to perform work in a delayed fashion longer than you anticipated. So when you find yourself in a delay, these are the questions you should be asking yourself. How do you notify your customer? Well, you look it up in the contract, find out how to do that, but do it in some fashion. The question is, how specific should your information be about where you're being impacted and the manner in which you're being impacted and whether you can quantify it. Should you do this? Yes, yes, and yes. The more specificity you give, the more readily you're going to be able to persuade your customer that these are real issues, and the more likely you're going to be able to get a recovery for those on your own without having to engage counsel at the end of the project. And hopefully that'll be the case. Again, we showed this example in last year's program. It's still the golden star example. This is a memo that was sent on a daily basis. Don't have to send this on a daily basis, but at least a weekly basis, by an electrical contractor who was being held up at multiple places on a project. And this project manager came up with this form, and he identified and sent this on a daily basis to his customers saying, these are the activities where we're being delayed or held up. These are the locations by lines where we're being held up. This is the status of those ideas, and these are reasons why we're being held up. That resulted in this case getting resolved. Unfortunately, it involved attorneys, but fortunately, it was resolved before it had to go through the prolonged trial process, because this is excellent data and it's compelling. Now, let's say you've done everything right. You've sought the change order, you've gotten the change order, you've performed the work, but the issue is the delay that you tried to capture early on has continued. It's gone longer than you anticipated, right? Have you already agreed by the change order that you executed to limit your recovery to the 10 days that you picked up in a certain period of time? The answer is likely yes. Yes, because a change order, remember, changes the contract. And most often the change order will say, this is the adjustment that you get. So what do you do when you have a situation where there's a prolonged risk of schedule loss and delay? You gotta think ahead. And what you need to do, and what we suggest to our clients to do, is to use language like this. This is taken out of an example that I typed up for a client within the last couple of weeks after looking at their contract to see what it said. And what we did is when we submitted change order requests to the customer for a quantified period of time, we would say we need X dollars to date, incurred to date, we need X amount of time to date. And then we put in this carve out language or some further explanation. We reserve the right to an additional extension of time and for actual loss of contract. We're reserving our right in the future to come back and identify and show you the impact we had to dollars and dates. If you put this into the change order form and your customer signs it, you have been given that ability to recover for future loss, future impacts. If you don't put this in your change order and it's signed by your customer, you're likely precluded from doing that. Now, the reality is, in the case that I'm talking about, this was the case. We put this in the change order proposal and sent it to the customer. What do you think the customer did with that? No way, not issuing this change order. Take it out. Take it out or we're not going to issue the change order. All right, so we took it out. And then we sent a letter similar to this. And Dan, am I stepping on your toes now?
Nope. I'm the one that's been taking your slides by accident.
But I'll finish this up then. But this is a letter, and it doesn't tie out to the exact language that we saw on the prior slide, but similar language where there was an effort to put in this caveat, this carve out language in the change order. And it says, look, we put that in our change order. We're trying to preserve our rights. We are intending to preserve our rights. You told us to take it out. You're not going to process it if we don't take it out. Okay, we're taking it out. And we're going to send that change order back to you to sign. But we're still on record. We reserve our rights. And we're only doing this because you're being a meanie and you're forcing us to go through these hoops. Now, is this a perfect way of resolving it? No. But get this in front of an arbitrator or a judge. They're going to go, I think I see what was going on here. And they may and hopefully will side with you.
Because these are, at the end of the day, these are all contract questions. And you don't have to go to law school to know that ultimately a contract, what people are agreeing to, it's about what the parties intended and how they express that intent. These letters, after being told take the language off, is you making very clear what your intent is. So no arbitrator is going to look at that waiver and say, oh, they knew they were waiving their rights and they waived them anyway. No, they said, you told me to remove the language, that's fine, but my claim isn't going anywhere. I still reserve my right to do fill in the blank. Acceleration is kind of the flip side of the delay coin, where we're now performing either the same work in a compressed time frame, or we've had work added without giving us an extension of time. Either way, you're kind of doing more in less time, and there are cost consequences of that really impact you, because you probably have to add labor and pay more journeymen to get that work done. It can happen in two ways. One is that it's actually directed by either the owner or the GC. It's more rare because people aren't typically doing that. It usually happens kind of constructively. And this is why we keep saying, always ask for time. If you have a change order that adds scope, ask for time. Because the more you ask for time and the more they say no, the more you're going to be able to prove that you've been accelerated. Because you'll have a no damages for delay clause in your contract that says you only get time. And then when you ask for time, your only remedy, and they say no, now you have basically backdoored entitlement to go after the acceleration costs, because all you're trying to do is follow the contract. We all know they're not going to give you more time, so ask for it. Get them to say no, then you're tracking all of the extra manpower and the costs that come with it. And those costs include what you see on the board here: overtime, inefficiency, additional supervision and overhead. There's some overlap with delay costs, but the big one is the labor overrun that it's going to create, because you're now going to go from your planned peak at 20 to 40, and it's not going to be pretty. So I've already given you the punchline. It's right here again. Ask for the extension. When they deny it, first you pump your fist, because you've kind of roped them into accelerating you, and then you're tracking your manpower, your labor. You're making sure those daily reports are reflecting the facts on the ground, because that's going to push it through. This is a sample letter that tees up that constructive acceleration. It's saying we're behind because of factors outside of our control. Other subs are in our way. We're asking for time. Here's how many days we're asking for. If you say no, we've been constructively accelerated. And the punchline is, I want you to see this, because this is an award from a panel of 3 arbitrators, large power plant project. And basically the punchline is, in this case, the owner refused to allow extensions of time to the schedule. And when they refused to provide extensions of time to the subs, we had to work all this extra overtime. And if you look at the language in yellow, having breached its obligation to compensate the sub with an extension of time with this, in accordance with this article of the contract, X is liable for damages caused by that breach. Everybody knew there wouldn't be a time extension. We asked for time. We didn't get it. Now you get paid money.
Always ask for the time, bottom line. All right, we have a minute and a half. We're in the final stretch. We got a couple slides. We're almost there. So stick with us. Let's say you've done everything that you had to do. You got your change orders in place. You put the preservation language in them. You got paid for it. You were able to seek an additional amount. You preserved the right to seek an additional amount in time at the end of the project. But wait a second, you might have tripped up. We all know on 99% of projects that you're going to be required to submit a release of liens, a release of claims, some partial release with each pay application, right? This is the most potentially damaging thing that can be done on a project if done just by signing it and submitting it. If you have claims that have not been fully compensated, if you are reserving rights to claims, you need to make the same carve-outs, the same reservations that we saw several slides ahead in the change order context within each of these partial releases. You have to do it most often, because these partial releases are not partial to anything. I've highlighted in orange what these partial releases, this is an actual document that we saw. what the partial release actually releases. What it releases is any and every claim and right that you have, including claims for delays, accelerations, damages, from the beginning of time to the submission of this form. So look at it carefully. If you have pending claims, insert the carve-out language that we saw several slides before, reserving your right to additional claims. Explain what claims you're preserving. If you do that, you're okay. If you don't do that, your claims have been waived. Right, last substantive slide. Look, if you get to the end of the project, you're not getting paid, these are remedies that you have. Each one of these topics could drive a 2-hour seminar by Dan and I, but know that you have pockets to put your hands into to get paid in the event that your customer doesn't pay you on time as appropriate. The first are prompt payment statutes, which is a spear to your customer. It prompts them to pay you timely, and if they don't, there's penalties. Varies state from state, but it makes it very uncomfortable for them not to pay you timely. Unfortunately, your subcontractors probably have the same rights against you. So you need to have a good practice of paying timely your subcontractors and pointing out deficiencies in their work if it excuses your payment. The other things are pockets. Mechanics liens is the pocket of the owner of the project. If it's a private project or a lienable project in your state, it means that the owner has to pay you for your work. Payment bonds is a surety or an insurance company. They have an obligation to pay you. Or breach of contract claims is your customer, usually your customer and perhaps other people in the chain, depending on what the law will allow through third-party actions. But it allows you to get paid through your customer or potentially others for your work. Be aware of those. Realize that these are remedies that you have to act on quickly. If you have issues, you should be addressing it with your counsel ASAP to have them give you advice. We'd rather help you preserve a claim and resolve a claim during the course of the project than have you spend tons of money on the back end. We open it up to questions. Dan and I are happy to stay on. Rob, thank you so very much for having us present. And we thank everybody for letting us go over a minute or two in our allotted time.
Likewise, thanks everybody. Again, we realized we really ran up against it. So our contact information is here. If you want to ask some questions now, that's great. And if you want to talk offline, we're certainly reachable. And Rob will push out the slides so that you guys can refer back to them.